Who started Unity 2020? This is the work, this is the idea of Bret Weinstein. I've been following Bret Weinstein actually since around 2017, which is the same year that the Evergreen Scandal that he was the target of, and we can say is still a heated issue today. That's when that was taking place. He is probably best described as he's an evolutionary theorist, no doubt, but evolutionary thinking in general is his gig, and we can describe him as sort of a leftist libertarian of sorts. So he definitely pulls to the left some, but with very strong libertarian principles in there as well. One of the best things, I think, to know about Bret Weinstein that can be easy to forget about people in general is one of his mottos. He says he used to teach his students that your science should always inform your politics should never inform your science. And so to whatever extent that informs us of his political stance, I think it's actually fairly informative. He's looking to apply his understanding of evolutionary theory and science to the political realm in this way. And having dealt with those politics at Evergreen, that may be very appropriate. So here we have an article, Evergreen professor at Center of Protest resigns, and college will pay $500,000. So both Bret Weinstein and his wife, Heather Hying, who was an anthropology professor, Bret Weinstein was a biology professor, they resigned due to the we can say scandal that was basically triggered when a proposal was made at Evergreen State College for what Weinstein believed was a racist call, possibly even an act of oppression, in the opposite way. Now, Bret Weinstein has a past history that's actually been very difficult to find details of activism for women of color, specifically black women, to have higher pay in the industry that he was working in. But that was a while back, and when Evergreen took off, this was in the midst of a lot of social justice fervor, and so it didn't go down very well. And Bret and others have conceded that apparently he was targeted for quite a long period of time during this by students who may have intended to inflict harm on him for his stance against the proposal. You can find more details in the article and elsewhere. I'm not going to get into it. But this is really influential to understanding where some of his thinking is coming from, because how Evergreen was handled by the leadership at that time has almost this sort of microcosmic effect, a reflection of what things are looking like at the broader spectrum here in American politics at the national level. So let's just say it didn't go down very well. The leadership was, in his opinion, in many people's opinions, very lacking, and therefore, in the resignation, he and his wife, Heather Hying, both, after resigning, decided to start other projects and go elsewhere. Now, among the things that they did, and you can find more in The Controversy of Bret Weinstein Explained, the Evergreen Scandal, another article that will be useful to get to the heart of this being written by the Medium. So we have one by Seattle Times and one by the Medium.com. All right, so the details of that are important. I don't mean to just skip over, but it is not what this system is meant to focus on. But do know that learning more about this issue tells you a lot about where this idea is coming from and why it is considered so important to those who are in it. Okay, another important detail about Bret Weinstein. He is part of what has been called for a while now the intellectual dark web, which is how I got to know him. I was first aware of Sam Harris and was listening to a number of other people in the intellectual dark web. Came to know of his brother Eric Weinstein, and through him, Bret Weinstein, who we're talking about presently. The IDW is I quote Wikipedia on this, and they base it on the primary article for the intellectual dark web. The article was from New York Times, an op-ed titled "Meet the Renegades of the Intellectual Dark Web," which I don't have up here right now, but you'll want to check that out. But Wikipedia says the term refers to a group of academics and media personalities who publish outside of the mainstream media. And I would go beyond that. I would say that the intellectual dark web also has some very specific principles that characterize the people within it, because it is comprised of people from all over the political spectrum, not just academics, although I would say the majority are definitely academics. They are all against the abuse of identity politics and social justice, not against social justice outright, but any parts of these widespread movements that are causes promoting censorship or imposing restriction on freedom of speech, or that are relying on really common logical fallacies, which I've checked out and they are there. As a tutor of logic, these are pretty prominent, I can say. You'll find most often the strawman fallacy. The strawman fallacy is basically making an argument look worse than it actually is so that it's easier to attack. Appeals to pity and or ad hominem attacks. And this being used to progress any one of these movements' agenda. This is something the IDW feels is not really appropriate. And Eric Weinstein in particular, Bret's brother, who we'll talk a little bit more in a second, he is in particular very against a system of what he calls the gated, institutional gated community. I believe that's the right order of phrasing. So all of this is to say that it's borderline conspiracy-like in the sense that there's a level of corruption that invades the media, and it invades a lot of our academic spheres. And this has not only been proposed by the IDW, but confirmed by many other sources to be fairly accurate, at least in most of its claims on that front. So the announcement of the Unity 2020 plan, it was actually first announced on the DarkHorse Podcast, which was created by Bret Weinstein and his wife Heather Hying. They have been running, I think they're up to their 32nd episode or something like that now. I've not seen all of them, I promise. I'd actually wish I could, I just don't have that kind of time. So on his 19th podcast live stream, what he titled Our Descent into Madness and What to Do About It. If you go about 40 minutes in, you will find him introducing the DarkHorse Duo plan, as he called it, for the first time. And he looks a little nervous. It's definitely something new and something that he's been entertaining for a while, and he's courageously trying to bring it out. I thought it was courageous in the sense that I don't know if I would have the vindication to come up to actually propose the plan in public, even if I'd had an idea similar to it. We'll still discuss whether or not the idea holds water or not here in just a moment. But this was back in the last of May 2020. Then in June, the following month, he announced it again in a much wider setting where the majority of the public who has heard of it at all first heard it, which was on Joe Rogan's podcast of that day. He's also mentioned it briefly in conversation in interviews, actually, with Tucker Carlson and by Crystal and Sagar of The Hill, on Rising of The Hill.